Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking an awe-inspiring 4.5 billion year chronological journey to discover exactly how our beautiful blue planet was born from a violent, completely chaotic cosmic hellscape. If you've ever wondered how we actually got from an empty void of space to a world covered in sprawling forests, deep oceans, and bustling civilizations, well, you are in exactly the right place. All right, so let's dive right into this massive mystery that scientists have been trying to piece together for decades now. It's a surprisingly tricky question. When Earth formed, what was the very first thing to exist on it? Spoiler alert, it wasn't just a single object, and it absolutely wasn't a living creature. To answer that question, you kind of have to throw out any image of oceans or trees or even solid ground. Because around 4.54 billion years ago, our newborn world was unimaginably hostile. It was literally nothing more than a violent, burning sphere of molten rock just floating through the immense darkness of space. No life, no water, and definitely no breathable air. But to really wrap our heads around how that burning sphere even came to be, we actually need to jump back even further. Before Earth could exist, the very building blocks of our planet had to be forged in the fiery deaths of ancient stars. Starting 13.8 billion years ago with the Big Bang, creating hydrogen and helium, moving through billions of years of massive stars forging heavy elements and exploding, to the collapse of the solar nebula 4.6 billion years ago to form our sun. And finally, around 4.54 billion years ago, millions of violent collisions between giant space rocks eventually accumulated to form the young Earth. Think about this for a second. Inside those ancient, massive stars that existed way before our sun was even a spark, much heavier elements were being cooked up. And when those stars exploded as supernovae, they scattered all those elements across space. So the absolute crucial takeaway here is that in a very literal sense, the Earth, and eventually everything on it, is entirely made out of dead stardust. The carbon, the oxygen, the silicon, iron, and magnesium that make up our world today all forged billions of years ago. Which brings us to part one, the fiery crucible, and Earth's molten beginnings. Now we actually reach the birth of the planet itself, as gravity pulled all that scattered stardust and space rubble together into this growing, violently bombarded mass. The early Earth became incredibly hot. Every single asteroid collision released just a tremendous amount of energy, and radioactive elements deep inside the planet were generating even more heat. It was so intense that the entire surface was a giant, glowing ocean of magma. So when we ask what was first, molten rock. That was the very first true state of Earth. As this giant glowing ball of liquid magma floated in space, it slowly began to cool down. And this kicks off a process known as planetary differentiation, which basically means the cooling Earth stacked itself into distinct layers. The heavy stuff, like really dense iron and nickel, sank straight to the center to form a scorching core, one that today rivals the temperature of the surface of the sun. Around it, semi-molten rock formed a thick mantle, and finally, the lighter materials floated right to the top and solidified into the crust, meaning that solid crust was our planet's first permanent structure. But hey, while the ground was finally solidifying, the air above it was complete chaos. Earth's first atmosphere was a massive contrast to what we breathe today. Spewed out by just non-stop volcanic eruptions, it was a totally toxic, deadly mix, packed with water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, and sulfur gases. And there was zero oxygen. None. Human survival there would be absolutely impossible. Yet, as crazy as it sounds, this incredibly hostile, toxic air was actually preparing the planet for its next major milestone. But hold on, because before Earth could truly settle down, it got hit hard. It faced one of the most cataclysmic events in its entire history, when a Mars-sized object named Theia just smashed right into our young planet. The impact was unimaginably powerful. We're talking energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs going off at once. This cataclysm melted large chunks of the planet all over again and blasted massive amounts of debris straight out into space. Over time, gravity pulled that ejected rock together to form our moon, and that moon became a vital companion that would go on to stabilize our tides and our rotation. Moving right along to part two, the great cooling and the formation of oceans and continents. Eventually, those crazy space impacts started to slow down, and the Earth entered a massive cooling phase. As the planet cooled over millions of years, the water vapor that was trapped in that early toxic atmosphere finally began to condense. And then, something absolutely extraordinary happened. It started to rain. And we are not talking about a rainy weekend here. This was an epic deluge that lasted for thousands, maybe even millions of years. This endless torrential rain transformed the surface forever. All that rainwater collected in the low-lying areas, forming Earth's very first liquid oceans. This liquid water was a game changer. It stabilized the planet's temperatures and essentially created a giant global chemical laboratory. At the exact same time, lighter cooling rocks kept rising upward, forming scattered fragments of primitive crust. And over billions of years of smashing together and pulling apart, those fragments eventually became the continents that you and I stand on right now. Okay, part 3, the biological spark and the dawn of early life. With liquid water and solid land finally in place, the stage was perfectly set for arguably the greatest mystery in all of science, the arrival of the very first life forms. This happened somewhere between 4.0 and 3.5 billion years ago. Somehow, simple chemicals became something entirely new. They became alive. Now, scientists still heavily debate exactly which of these hostile environments sparked that first living chemistry. Was it the boiling, mineral-rich cracks of deep ocean vents, sunlit shallow pools, or maybe highly active volcanic areas? We don't know for sure, but we do know the result. The very first living organisms were incredibly simple, single-celled microbes. No eyes, no brains, no organs. They just survived by consuming chemicals right out of their environment. But over millions of years, some of these microscopic little guys evolved a trick that would quite literally change the universe. Meet cyanobacteria. These tiny, single-celled ocean organisms evolved the absolute revolutionary ability to use sunlight to produce energy, a process you probably know as photosynthesis. And crucially, they released oxygen as a waste product. It's wild to think about, but these tiny cyanobacteria are the ancestors of every living thing today, and their microscopic waste product was about to permanently alter the destiny of the entire planet. And that leads us to part 4, the legacy and the great oxygen revolution. Let's fast forward a bit to 2.4 billion years ago and see how this all builds into an event that literally made your very existence possible. For a long time, the oxygen released by those cyanobacteria just reacted with the iron in the oceans. It got soaked up. But eventually, they multiplied so much that oxygen levels dramatically spiked in the atmosphere. Scientists call this the Great Oxidation Event. Ironically, it was highly toxic to a lot of those early microbes and killed them off. But that atmospheric oxygen eventually built up to create the ozone layer, which shielded the surface from deadly solar radiation. This one single chemical shift paved the way for complex, multicellular life to evolve. It led directly to jellyfish, worms, dinosaurs, mammals, and eventually, us. So let's circle back to that original question. What was first? Well, looking at this timeline, we can clearly see the answer. Earth didn't just have one single first thing. It was a chain reaction. First came a material state of molten rock, then a permanent structure in the form of a solid crust. That was followed by an atmosphere of toxic volcanic gas. Then water rained down to form condensed oceans. Land emerged as primitive continents. And finally, life sparked as single-celled microbes. It was a perfectly connected chain of events where every single stage built entirely upon the fiery ruins of the last. Think about it. Without the molten rock, there'd be no crust. Without the crust, no oceans. And without the oceans, absolutely no life. The very atoms inside your body, right now, were literally forged in the death of ancient stars and battered in a glowing magma ocean. Meaning you weren't just some resident walking around on the surface of this planet. You are the astonishing living result of its 4.5 billion year journey. Which leaves us with a truly mind-bending final thought. The next time you look up at the night sky, are you simply a human looking out at the universe? Or are you the universe finally looking back at itself?